Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Game Prodigy. Today we are talking about something I want to make a video for a very long time. We're talking about win rates. And there's been a lot of videos coming out recently that have a lot of information about win rate that I feel is untrue. And I'm making this to discuss win rate and stat shaming and all of that stuff. So a quick disclaimer ahead of time. Um, I'm going to try and cover all the different elements of win rate of the North American population. There will always be some exceptions. So in the comments, please understand, and I'm going to try and cover a lot of them, but like there will be exceptions. But generally, I'm a firm believer in statistics. Statistics don't lie. That generally we're going to be able to look at this and no matter where you slot in on this chart, I'm going to be able to give you some things that are going to help you improve as a player. And so let's start with some cold, hard statistical truths. And that's where you sit based on your win rate against the rest of the population. And Little White Mouse in 2016 covered win rate, and they didn't really have the data back then, and she said that, but in 2022 we have years worth of data, and it turns out everything that she said was true. So I'm going to lean very heavily on many of the things that she said, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But so looking at this chart, this is all of the NA random players, and basically there's a bottom line of 39% win rate, with some exceptions, but for the most part, if you do nothing, if you're a terrible player, short of throwing the game, you're going to end up with a 39% win rate. And that takes into account luck, that takes into account terrible matchmaking, terrible teams, great teams, overpowered chips, basically any argument that people make about things that will impact your win rate. The bottom of the barrel is 39%. As long as you have about 1,000 games. So you can have less than that. But once you've played about 1,000 games, 39% is the bottom of the barrel. And if you're there, then there's lots of room for improvement. The next step up is the 40 to 42 percenters. That means you are better than, so if you're at 42%, 2.79% of the players you're better than. That also means 97% of the players are better than you. So if you're there, again, lots of room for improvement. The 42 to 45% players at the high end, that means you're better than 18%, 18.89% of the players. That's below average. It's well below average. That's where a lot of people who show a lot of anger towards the higher level players sit. And we'll address that in a little bit, but that's honestly where you are in relation to all of the people that you're playing against. If you're in the 46 to 48%, and now we're getting into statistics, this is where the overwhelming majority of the players are going to lie. You're going to be, if you're in the 46% to 48%, basically 49 to 50, and the 51 to 55, you represent the bulk of the player base. And depending on where you are there, and depending on how many games you played, so if you're at 46% and you're 2,000 3,000 games in, then that's okay. Like, you still have lots of time and lots of room to grow. If you're at 46% and you're 10,000 games in, you've made a lot of mistakes. And again, if you're at 46%, you're still only better than 18% of the players. That's the honest truth of where you're at. And the truth hurts, but that's where you're at. If you're at 48%, 2% better, you're better than 44% of the players. Once you get up to 50%, which I'll never understand this to this day, but if you're at a 50% win rate, that means that you're better than 61% of the player base. So if you win half the time, that means there's a propensity for loss in this. And that's because there's a lot of people that this is this is skewed heavily in the loss direction. There are more people that obviously there's 61% of the players have less than a 50% win rate. So you're going to have on your team a higher proportion of players that aren't used to winning. And that makes the 51% higher even more difficult to obtain. So you're doing all of this in spite of having more often than not teams that aren't filled with players that win half the time. So you're at 51 to, so once you get to 55% win rate, you're better than 90% of the player base. And once you get to these sophisticated levels, I mean, at 2% more, you're better than the 95%. And at the very tippy top, if you can win 69% of the time, you're better than 99.9% of the players. And so you have to ask yourself, so if I do nothing, and this is from 2016 with Mouse, if I do nothing, I'm a 39% player. That's like the bare bones. 1,000 games, 39%. Okay, and there's a learning curve in this, and this is what newer players have to grasp. When I first started playing this game, I started at a 42% win rate. I am presently at 56%, but that took 8,000 games and a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of struggle. And there were ups and downs. I mean, I had periods of time where I was winning a ton, and just recently I'm going through a period of time where no matter what I do, I can't win. And Mouse brought this up. So even the very best players in this game, in solo gameplay, are unable to carry their team 1/3 of the time. So in playing this game, you accept the fact that 1/3, 33% of the time, technically 39% of the time, there is nothing you can do to win. As a solo player. Now you can improve those odds and all of that stuff. And the thing I've noticed is there's a lot of people who are on the sub 45 that are very, very angry at the better skilled players. And there are some people that are on the high skilled players that are very vocal, that may not actually be as good as their win rate would suggest. And let's talk about what could cause your win rate to be higher than your actual skill level. And I think that the number one thing would be the what tier you play. And I'm not saying, you know, there's some ships like the Kamikaze are that are just wildly overpowered, and if that's all you play and your win rate is, you know, 60%, I'm not that impressed. It's fun to play it. I'll play it. I'm a SEAL clubber. I freely admit this. But I also play, you know, all the other tiers. There's a predatory SEAL clubber that I would consider the tier 1 division players, where tier 1 is really the only tier where very, very rarely you will find any type of experienced player. And so people who play exclusively tier 1, and with the way the game works now, it's likely not even filling up with real players, and they're playing against bots, and some of the highest win rates in North America are people that play exclusively tier 1. They're not good players. And I can show you that statistically. Their hit rate's terrible, but they're playing in such a skewed environment in their favor that their win rate is high. And I wouldn't consider them. I would never put them on a competitive team, period, because they'd be terrible. But their win rate reflects otherwise. There's role specialists. Now, I'm going to anger some people here, but there are people who choose to play one class of ship, and they play it very well. And their win rate can be very high. But absent that particular class of ships and only that class of ships, they don't know how to play the game. And so I take their word about a lot of things of the state of the game with a grain of salt. When it comes to their particular class, yes, they're very knowledgeable on that. But when it comes to how their tier, and I see this with CV players a lot. There's a lot of very high win rate CV players that honestly try and speak about DD play and cruiser play and battleship play, and it's funny to listen to because they really have no frame of reference to be able to speak about this other than playing as their specific role. So they can have a very high win rate, but they may not actually be, and oftentimes aren't good at other tiers of ships. So the truly elite players are ones who can play the majority of ship classes, not all of them, the majority, like at least 3 battleships, maybe CVs and destroyers at a high level. That's what I would consider an elite player. And then built into everyone's stats, at least theory, is that learning curve. When you first start playing the game, you're going to lose a lot. You're going to make dumb mistakes. You don't know any better. And you constantly have to overcome those losses. The exception being a reroll. And so you'll find people who have eliminated the burden of all of those losses. And so their win rate is higher, even though their skill may not be. So for me to go from 42 to 56, I technically have to be playing at Unicum level because I have to drag it up to 56. If I just played at a 56% level, I would never be able to get to 56 because I have the burden of my 42% initial win rate. So if you re-roll your accounts, then yeah, you eliminate all of that learning process. And of course, you're going to have better statistics. So those are all things that I look at. So now that we've gotten the blunt, honest truth out, what is the difference? What are the generalized differences between these levels? And how can this help you improve? And I'm going to give you 4 things. But the most important, and I've got 8,000 some games, the singular most important measure and the most marked difference you will see between all of these win rates is your survival rate. If you can increase your survival rate, then your win rate will go up. I guarantee you that. Short of you going like out of your way to pump a corner somewhere off and never engage in the battle. But again, there's always exceptions. So if you look at these people who are, let's just say 45 and below, their survival rate is less than 20% on average. And in the middle, your survival rate's somewhere in the mid 20s to about 30. And then once you get up to the 56 to elite level, you're talking about a survival rate of 30s all the way up to 50%. Like the elite people will live 50% of the time. And so what does that mean? Okay, well, on the most basic level, if you're dead, you individually cannot win the game for your team. So if you have a survival rating of 13% and you have a win rate of 40%, that means 27% of the games that you've won, someone else on your team has done it for you because you're dead. You cannot do it. Also, if you're alive, the longer you're alive, the more opportunity for damage you get. And very often you will see players on the lower end of the win rate spectrum take shots because they see an opportunity, not taking into account the threat it is to them, or if they're in an advantage or in a disadvantage, and they'd say, well, there was an opportunity for damage, but had they waited a minute and a half and gotten themselves into a better position, that opportunity for damage is exponentially greater, but they're dead. And if you find yourself dying in battle, and if go on to WoW's numbers, look at your battle survived, and you want that number to be going up. It's not always going to happen. There are highs and there are lows in this game, but generally you want to survive more. And so then the next level of that, once you've learned how to survive more, the next difference between these win rates is when you actually shoot, do you hit the target? And that sounds very simple and basic, but I watch people who have 10,000 games miss the same shots every time because it becomes habit. And there's a big difference between, I would say, the 46 to 55 and the higher level people is they both have habits of where they shoot. The difference being one of them is this is where, like, you have that muscle memory of this is where I shoot, but it's wrong. And for me, to this day, I cannot hit a ship that is sailing slightly on an angle away from me. I struggle to do it. And I have the muscle memory, but it's wrong. And so I miss those shots. And what you're looking for, so on the lower end of the spectrum, they're hitting less than a quarter of the shots, 25% of the shots they're taking. The middle is somewhere between 25 and 30%. And it goes all the way up to about 40% of the shots you take on the elite level, they're hitting. Anything more than that, and I didn't cover this yet, but there are cheats in this game. In any competitive online game, there are going to be people who cheat. And for me, this is my personal opinion, once you get above a 40% hit rate, unless you are using a very specific ship and you are shooting at very short range a lot, it's really suspicious. That's all I'll say about that. A 40 to 44 is the upper crust of elite play. And that means that at the most elite level, half the shots are being missed. But at the lowest level, you're missing 80% of every shot you take. So that factors into whether you live or not as well. So living, a big part of living is obviously being able to, when you do get into those battles, being able to do enough damage faster than your opponent to be able to survive. The next market difference between these win rates is going to be minimap awareness. And from about level 45 and down, their minimap awareness is 0. Very very little. When you get into the 46 to 55 players, they're looking at the mini map. They look at it kind of in the beginning and will glance at it from time to time. But they're not looking at they're not looking, or maybe they're just doing it so for advantage. Like, big thing I talk to people about is you want to be in an advantage situation when you're fighting someone. So I've seen a lot of lower level people fight 4v1. That's a terrible idea. You want to disengage and be gone, or ideally you want to never put yourself in that situation. And in the middle range, if you looked at the mini map, you would be able to mitigate. You can't always prevent it, but mitigate those situations where you're in a very, very bad disadvantage. At the higher level, they're using that mini map not only to know where things are, but to glean information from it. So you can tell based on where ships are moving that are spotted early on where a destroyer likely is. It may not be spotted, but you can see on the mini map when something's being capped, and so you can know where destroyers or subs are. You can tell where the CV most likely is based on where his planes are coming from. You can get a lot of information based on other information that you can see that is not apparent on the mini map. And at that highest level, that's what they're doing. And that comes with time, and that comes with practice. And another part of that mini map awareness is knowing what ships are there. So at the beginning of every battle, I look at what every ship is there, and you can tell by the torpedoes you see what DD it might be, based on the number of torpedoes and based on the speed of the torpedoes and and how far they come into your zone. Like a gearing can fire 16 fives. So those are all things. Those are using the mini map and using the information and then gleaning additional information from it that's not readily apparent. And then the last thing, and this is the mistake that the high level players make when they're trying to teach people who are struggling at win rate, the tactics. You have to live before you even consider tactics. You have to be able to shoot something accurately before tactics even matter. And minimap awareness and tactics kind of go hand in hand, but things like throttling your speed to have an opponent miss their shot, and kiting away, and ambush locations, and for cruisers and stuff, what places on the maps you can shoot without being spotted. Those are tactics. You got to do all the other stuff well before you get to tactics. And a lot of high level players try and teach tactics before they encourage surviving, actually hitting the shots, and minimap awareness. So all of those things go into it. If you're at the lower end of the spectrum, stop looking at these higher level players like they're some are jerks, some are absolutely jerks, and some of them may have stats that don't accurately reflect their stuff. But the overwhelming majority of these people do a lot of things well, and you can get there as well. And if you're not there, don't use that as a reason to hate these people. You know, they're not doing anything secret. Don't feel like they're hiding something from you that's the reason why you're there. You're there because of you. Take that responsibility. And if you want to get better, it's a matter of time, and it's a matter of learning these things and observing to see if you're stagnating, then there's something else you could be doing. And so that's what I've got. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear from you. If you want your individual statistics looked at, please message me privately. I'll be more than happy to do that. As always, until next time, I appreciate you guys watching and look forward to hearing what you have to say. Take care.